There's an old rabbinic story. You may have heard it. It's a famous one. A Gentile comes to the great Hebrew rabbi, the sage Shema, and says, "Teach me the whole Torah while I stand on one leg." Shema was not amused, and he chases the guy off. So the man goes to Shema's rabbinic rival, Hillel, and asks the same thing. "Teach me the whole Torah, standing on one leg." Hillel, he doesn't flinch. He says, "Get ready, here we go, start standing. What's hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor." That's the whole Torah. The rest is commentary. So start learning. And every rabbi and most bar mitzvah and bat mitzvah students, we know this story. And most of us as leaders of a congregation, we get asked some version of that question eventually. All right, if you had to boil it all down, what actually matters most? See, that's not a trick question. It's the question. And this morning, it's Yeshua's turn to answer it. Except this time, the man isn't trying to be a wise guy, isn't trying to trip him up. After 3 straight rounds of ambush questions from Sadducees, from Pharisees, and from the ever-loving Herodians, scribe walks up with something nobody expected in the temple courts that week. A sincere question. You know, almost from the very moment of Yeshua's arrival in Jerusalem, following his spectacular entrance on the donkey in fulfillment of Zechariah 9:9, the Jewish leadership immediately challenged and were challenged by Yeshua. And Yeshua particularly pointed out to the leadership in the most visceral, theatric, and dramatic manner possible to communicate to the leadership that their priorities were way off kilter. You know, the cleansing of the temple that started things off so beautifully. But remember, by performing this kind of commerce within the court of the Gentiles and the area where the Gentile worshipers were to be, that they were crowding out non-Jews. And these are the ones who came to worship the one true God. In these past weeks, we've seen passage after passage, section by section, Jesus coming to the temple every day and being challenged by a variety of the Jewish leadership on a plethora of issues as they responded to his initial dramatic actions by attempting to trap him by his own words. Attempting to back him into a corner, to basically make him say that his authority is from God. Therefore, verbally affirming that he's the Messiah, or that his authority was not from God, and putting an end to his aspirations whatsoever. Last time we looked at the latest creative entrapment, whether he was going to come out as pro-Rome regarding taxes, or anti-Rome and paying taxes In the one instance, he'd be saying, "Yay, Rome!" And no one's going to follow a Jewish Messiah who's in the pocket of Rome. They already had a guy like that in Herod. But if Yeshua were to come out against Roman taxes, he'd be branded as a seditionist and a revolutionary and be arrested. Each time Yeshua is able to employ a little jiu-jitsu, turning the enemy's strengths into their weaknesses, and being able to say what he needed to say without getting into trouble, and without making his antagonist look small. But here we are again. This is the fourth and final confrontational challenge. We've seen the Sadducees, the Pharisees, the Herodians, the chief priests. Now it's going to be the scribes who take their turn. Everyone gets a turn at Jesus as the messianic piñata. Take a whack at him. Go ahead. But each time, Yeshua has been able to deftly counter and come up on top of each argument. So, in review, remember what happened last time. We saw Pharisees and Herodians come in order to trap him. And they asked him if it's lawful to pay a poll tax to Caesar or not. Not that Caesar, that Caesar, Tiberius. Shall we pay or not pay? He, knowing their hypocrisy, said to them, "Why are you testing me? Bring me a denarius to look at, to examine." This is where Yeshua is going to do his Jew-jitsu. Here's the denarius. It's tiny. It's a tiny little coin. And if you look closely at it, you'll see it's got Caesar's face on it, Pontifex Maximus on the back. And they brought him a denarius. And Yeshua said to them, "Whose likeness and inscription are on the denarius?" And they said, "Of course, it was Caesar's." And Yeshua said to them, "Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and render to God the things that are God's." And they were amazed at his answer. We have, remember, the Sadducees came, and they don't believe in the resurrection, so they attempted to make him look foolish by asking a very complicated question about the resurrection, about levirate, specifically levirate marriage and the resurrection. We've got 7 brothers, and in turn, each one of them takes a wife and died without any children. Therefore, each brother is going to marry that widow, and then he dies and then marries the widow, and so on and so on. And she winds up having one bride, 7 husbands. They all die. No children, right? No investigation into why this lady seven husbands and they all died. Well, but in the resurrection, when they rise again, which one's wife will she be? For all 7 had married her, and Jesus said to them, "Is this not the reason you are mistaken? That you do not understand the scriptures or the power of God?" In other words, the question is a stupid question because you don't understand the scriptures and you do not understand the power of God. Bottom line is, you need to understand. If you're going to wrestle with the creator of the universe, if you're going to wrestle with the Messiah, you better understand the scriptures And the power behind those scriptures, the power of God. And he concludes regarding the Sadducees and their failure to believe in resurrection. When they rise from the dead, they neither marry nor are given in marriage. They're like angels in heaven. But regarding the fact that the dead rise again, have you not read? And you'll remember, again, I'm going to review because it's very, very important to remember. Sadducees did not believe in the resurrection. Not only did they not believe in the resurrection, they did not believe in anything beyond the Hebrew Bible. The 5 books of Moses were all that the Sadducees held to. They did not believe that the prophets were inspired. They did not believe that the Psalms were the inspired word of God. They only believed that the first 5 books of Moses were worth listening to. So, this is what's so brilliant about what Yeshua says here, knowing that the Sadducees do not believe in the prophets, where he could have gone to, as I showed last week, he could have gone to Isaiah and shown, well, resurrection is right here in Isaiah, and they would have said, well, we don't believe in Isaiah, okay, it's not authoritative for us, so big deal. Or Yeshua could have said, well, let me show you a passage in Daniel that talks about the resurrection. Well, Daniel is not authoritative for us. The only authoritative scripture we have is Moses, and Moses doesn't speak about the resurrection, to which Yeshua says, au contraire, which is Hebrew for au contraire. He says, have you not read in the book of Moses, which of course is all they've read, and they're experts at reading the books of Moses. So have you not read is right there, Azetz. Have you not read in the book of Moses, in the passage, well, you know, the famous one, in Exodus 3, passage about the burning bush. You know, the story of Moses himself, how God spoke to Moses saying, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. So he doesn't say, I was the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because they're dead. He said, I am. I was then, I still am. You know why? Because they're still alive. And they will have resurrection bodies. This is not the God of the dead. He says, we're not talking about a God of the dead. We're talking about a God of the living. And you, because I know you've read it, you're simply greatly mistaken. In other words, you are wrong. Wrong. You do not understand the scripture. You do not understand the power of God. Having finished that encounter, we get to our 4th and final encounter here. The section I call Commandment and Contrast. One of the scribes came and heard them arguing. They heard Yeshua say, wrong, and heard them arguing, recognizing that Yeshua had answered them well. He has a question for Yeshua himself. So the next group present was listening in. I would be too, so would you. They're listening in on the previous discussion that was going on. And this rabbi, was famous, or infamous, depending on your point of view, for his wisdom and for his deft answers to any challenges. And so these disputes between Yeshua and the leadership, they were of great interest to many. And if Yeshua wasn't sufficiently infamous previously because of the healings, because of the exorcisms, because of miracles, because of his authoritative preaching, he was certainly well known, if for nothing else than turning over the tables. These kinds of conversations, that's high entertainment for Jewish people, this kind of theological verbal jousting. high entertainment, especially if this is your thing. And if you're in leadership, of course, the discussions are need to know information to see how well Yeshua acquits himself or not. The scribes, listening in, recognized that Yeshua had answered everyone well. The question on Caesar and taxes, the question about the authority of John and his baptism, the one on resurrection, all answered beautifully. So the scribes say, I'm going to ask him a question. This seems to be going well. And as I read, it looks to me like there's nothing in the passage here. Mark usually tells us, and this was designed to trap Yeshua. There's nothing in the text here that indicates that this is an antagonistic question. There's every indication here that the scribe listening in, who has the guts to interpose himself into the conversation, that he really wants to know the answer. And the question he asks is, what commandment is the foremost of all? And like the questions regarding Yeshua's authority, paying taxes or not, but this is another popular question that was batted about by the Jewish people. You got 1,613 commandments within the Torah. Thou shalt and thou shalt nots. How should we organize those 613 thou shalts and thou shalt nots? How should we prioritize them? Are they all equal in weight? Are some more weighty than others and others less weighty? And if there is weightiness in these commandments, which one of them is the most important? Which one takes the greatest priority in the pyramid of the Torah? What commandment is the foremost of all? And Yeshua answered, the foremost is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. You know where that comes from? We've just recited it. Deuteronomy 6:4. It is the centerpiece of the Shema. And it continues, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. Again, these verses go together as the Ve'ahavta. And these two verses join together as we recite each week. These comprise the greatest commandment. Now I want you to notice one thing that's different from what we recite every week in the translation of the Ve'ahavta together. What is different about what Yeshua is reading here and what we have just recited from the Hebrew? Mind. Yes, the addition of the word mind. Why does Yeshua insert the word mind in the statement? Well, he may not have. That actually may have been Mark writing in Greek. Remember, Mark is giving you a Greek translation of what Yeshua originally said in Aramaic. And in the Hebrew and in the Aramaic, the original verse from Deuteronomy says heart, soul, and might or strength, right? You've got levavcha, that's with your heart, your nafshecha, that's with all your soul, and meodecha, which actually doesn't mean might or strength. It actually simply means with your very, right? But in Hebrew, there is no original word says mind. But again, Mark, writing primarily for a Greek-speaking audience, has the responsibility to communicate the Jewish concept of what is meant, what is understood by the Jewish people by heart. And heart, for the Jewish people, Jewish sensibilities, contains not just the seat of emotions, but of will in Jewish thinking. The Hebrew word itself contains concepts of heart and mind combined in one. And he wants to make sure that his Greek-speaking audience gets the point. And so we have Mark making this insertion of the word mind in there as well, to provide the understanding that ultimately there is not one component of your body, whether you're speaking in Hebrew, whether you're speaking in Aramaic, or whether you're speaking in Greek, not one component of your body is exempt from loving the Lord your God. Whatever you got, from your heart, your guts, your mind, everything you are, love Him with everything you've got. If you think you don't have sufficient resources, this verse encourages us to dig deeper, because give your your muchness, everything you have. Give Him all you got. And that's why the word mind is there. And I love this passage. And that's why we do the Shema with the Ve'ahavta in the worship service every morning. It's very important. And Yeshua himself obviously says it's the most important one. It's the weightiest of the commandments. Yeah, there is a priority of commandments. And this is the weightiest. And I like it because it encompasses the fullness of who we are and what God expects of each one of us. There are some churches, and well, you know the denominations, there are some churches that appeal primarily to your heart and your feelings. And when you go there, you feel very good. Your batteries get recharged, and you say, oh, I felt the Lord was in the house. The Lord came down. This is probably primarily about feelings. I felt this, right? Feelings and heart. And there are other congregations that, in reaction to the previous kind, will make sure that you understand the most important thing is the knowledge that we can acquire and pass on. And so it feeds the mind, the intellect, the base of knowledge. And some people, they would say, well, I really got fed this morning, right? I learned today. I got fed this morning in those congregations. But Yeshua is saying to emphasize one aspect and ignore the other, or to emphasize the other and ignore the other, is to certainly be insufficient in his eyes. To love the Lord your God with all your heart, with the seat of your emotions. And you've got to love the Lord your God with your intellect. And you've got to love the Lord your God with everything you got. I don't ever want to hear a believing Jew or Gentile say, yeah, don't give me too much Bible. Don't give me too much theology. I'm just here to worship. Because then you're admitting that you don't love the Lord your God with all your mind. And the intellect is taking second place to your heart. And I don't want to hear anybody say, yeah, so much worship. I don't need the good feels, the thrills. I want meat. Feed me. But both worship and the seat of the emotions and intellect, the mind, they're both important. And we strive to provide a balance here at Beth Shalom, the house of the Prince of Peace. And so what Yeshua is saying, this is the foremost commandment. The second is this of secondary, but right behind primary importance, and the number 2 with a bullet position. The second is this. Because Jesus wasn't done yet. He said, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. That's not part of the Shema. It's not even in Deuteronomy 6. It's actually not even from Deuteronomy. It is found here in Leviticus 19, verse 18. And it's not even a standalone verse. It's a phrase within a larger component of relationship with your neighbors. Leviticus is not anywhere near Deuteronomy. It's a whole book away, book in between them. But nonetheless, Yeshua takes these 2 verses, the famous Shema with the Ve'ahavta, and he smashes them together with this phrase from Leviticus 19:18. Look at that verse. You shall not take vengeance, nor bear any grudge against the sons of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. Why am I not to take vengeance or bear grudges or resentment against any of my mishpucha? Instead, I'm supposed to love them. Why? Is there a rationale? Leviticus tells us the rationale is because I said so. That's what I am the Lord means. I am Jehovah. And that should be all that's necessary for you to obey this, because I said so. Well, how these verses relate? If you think of Torah, how do they smash together? How does Jesus arrive at this? If you think of Torah and simply summarize in your head what the Torah is and how we can think about it in a nutshell, we can think about Torah in a simplistic way as being summarized by the 10 Commandments. And just accept that as a model. Okay, how do we summarize the Torah? Well, let's just say the 10 Commandments, because often the 10 Commandments are used as a substitute for a shorthand for Torah. But if we think about the 10 Commandments, if we look at the first 4 commandments of the 10, the first 4 commandments, they all deal with Israel's relationship to God. So you could summarize the first 4 commandments of the 10 as loving the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, with all your might, etc. Now the following 6 commandments of the 10 are not on a vertical plane with how Israel relates to God, but rather on how Israel relates to their corporate neighbors and their individual neighbors within Israel. So outside and inside their neighborhood. Who are the people of your neighborhood? In your neighborhood? In your neighborhood? Who are the people of your neighborhood? That's the question that Yeshua, of course, answered in the famous parable. Who is my neighbor? So who are your neighbors? Yeshua said, Everyone's your neighbor, man. That's in the original Hebrew. Everyone's your neighbor. Even those who you don't want to. Listen, many of us live in our homes or our apartments with people on our blocks or next door or across the street or across the alley that we wish would quickly move. Right? Can I get an amen? Right. But they're our neighbors. Even those we don't wish were our neighbors. Right? And the thing is, if it were natural, we wouldn't have to be commanded. If it were natural for us to love the Lord our God with all our hearts, with all our soul, with all our everything that we have, we wouldn't need to have that preference. Hear, O Israel, take stock. I'm going to lay this on you. It's a commandment. Because it doesn't always come naturally. It's very easy to love the neighbor that takes it upon themselves. I've got a neighbor who, if I'm a little late to wheeling back my garbage cans from the alley and back onto the driveway, I came out, for example, this morning, and the cans were wheeled back in position. Magically. It's easy to love a neighbor like that, right? That comes naturally. I do not love all of my neighbors that naturally. So we are commanded to love your neighbors as yourself. And these final 6 of the 10 commandments, they are all on a horizontal plane. How man relates to mankind. How we are to relate to others. So we have, in a sense, what Yeshua is giving us, we have, if the 10 commandments are a summary of Torah, we've got Yeshua giving us a summary of the 10 commandments in these 2 commandments without needing to actually quote them all. He simply summarizes them. Love the Lord your God, love your neighbor as yourself. And the thing is, regarding loving your neighbor as yourself, the assumption is not, well, the first thing you got to worry about is making sure you love yourself. It's a lot of books written on making sure you love yourself, right? Self-love. But the assumption that Torah makes and the assumption that the gospel makes here is you don't need to read a book or go to a self-help seminar to learn how to love yourself. Of course you love yourself. Of course you care for yourself. Of course you're not going to neglect anything on the bottom basic hierarchy of Maslow's needs. You need clothing, you're going to clothe yourself. You need food, you're going to feed yourself. You need shelter, you're going to take care of you. Of course you are. We're all going to address clothing, shelter, relationship. We all want these things. Why? Because we ultimately love ourselves. It comes naturally to us. How do I know this is not true? Or this is true, rather? Because I am a parent. You know, children who are not preoccupied with themselves, you know, the moment your baby comes home with you from the hospital, the baby begins to cry incessantly, on and on, in that shrill pitch that's guaranteed to wake you up from sleep, even if you're a husband. And no matter how tired you are, that penetrates. And you realize pretty quickly that individuals are born with a predisposition to be all about themselves. So Yeshua is not teaching, well, first get in touch with yourself. You got to learn to love yourself, and only then you can relate to other people. Nonsense. Love your neighbor as you already love yourself. One of the learning curves I've had to absorb over time, and coming late in life to pet ownership, is to remember to feed my cat before I feed myself. One time I came home, I was on my own for food. Jonathan and Adria were out, and I had a delicious, piping hot, fresh Papa John's pizza. Hot and delicious. I come in the door, carrying this, it's burning my hand, ready to be eaten. And my cat comes running up to me. And I know what he wants, because it's his lunchtime too. But I want to eat my hot pizza while it's hot. But I got to feed my cat first, because in my house, even my cat is my neighbor. Actually, it's part of the family, right? But you have to take care of others, right? And my assumption in the story here is that I actually wanted to eat that pizza, right? In reality, we've got to love our neighbor as ourselves. And when these two commandments come together, they're joined together by Jesus, it's very important that we not ignore one for the other. And so the only important thing is to love the Lord. That's the only thing, my relationship with God. That's the only important thing. I've heard this many times over the years. Dozens of times over the years from a lot of people who claim that the only thing that matters in their life is their personal relationship with God. Whether this has to do with American individualism or in our culture, or but it's usually actually in the context of, hey, I haven't seen you, in the context of, I haven't seen you at church lately, or maybe you haven't gone to church at all. Maybe you don't relate to other believers at all. Because it's all about you and your relationship with the Lord, with God. That's one kind of, it's a skewed theology. Skewed theology, one consonant away from screwy theology. A lot of churches over the last century who only emphasize loving your neighbor as yourself. Your relationship to God is a personal issue, but we don't push so much because it's too personal. Relationship with one another, it's optional. If you love God, maybe with your heart, not your mind, or may love Him with your mind, not your heart. If you have a good ephemeral feeling for God, but really, some churches are all about how you relate with one another, doing good with one another, and God is kind of a secondary idea. That's how you show your religion, right? Your commitment to God by how you love your neighbors. But both are necessary. You cannot substitute one for the other without creating a detrimental relationship with yourself. Right. So, the scribe said to him, right, teacher, or in the original Aramaic, right on, teacher. You have truly stated that He is one, and there is no one else besides Him. To love Him with all your heart, with all your understanding, with all your strength, to love one's neighbor as himself, is much more than all burnt offerings and sacrifice. We've read this already. When Yeshua saw the scribe had answered intelligently, Yeshua said to him, you are not far from the kingdom of God. The scribe is impressed by Yeshua coming in and exiting the conversation. The scribe is even more impressed on the way out that he is coming in. After that, no one would venture to ask him any questions. So the scribe, standing in judgment of Yeshua, asking a question, but Yeshua actually is standing in judgment of the scribe. And that's been the point all along. The questioner sought to judge Jesus, weighing the answers of this rabbi, going to say, pretty good, not bad, right on, whatever. But Yeshua is weighing the scribe's answers, and he finds the scribe's answer falling short. Jesus weighed the guy's answer and says, you're not far from the kingdom of heaven. That actually is a completely accurate statement. You are not far from the kingdom of heaven, not in a theoretical way. But there's going to be more needed than just sacrifice and offering or loving the Lord your God and loving your neighbor. Something else is missing. But he says basically you're on the right track. If you actually think about it, when Yeshua said you're not far from the kingdom of heaven, he spoke literally, because the king was a mere few feet from him. So he was not far from the kingdom and from the king. But the punchline is here. No one would venture to ask him any more questions. After the round 1, 2, 3, and 4, I'd say not a bad accomplishment for a Jewish audience to quiet a challenging, antagonistic Jewish audience with one clever answer after another. No small feat. But Jesus is going to answer or ask another question for himself. Let me set the agenda in the next verse. However, for us to see how Yeshua wraps these challenges up, for us to see how Yeshua binds together and ties with a beautiful bow and ribbon his series of discussions with the leadership of Jerusalem by asking a question of his own, I'm afraid I'm going to have to leave you in suspense. We will pick the story up next week. A very quick peek. The question is regarding how is Yeshua the son of David? What's a so what? My so what is for you. Not just to agree with the greatest commandment, but let the Lord catch you living aside it, living it out. Scribe, he had a good answer. Love the Lord your God, love your neighbor. It's more important than sacrifice, burnt offering. He recited it back. He nodded along, even elaborated on it intelligently. But Yeshua says, close but no cigar. You're not far. Close enough to see it, close enough to touch it, but not to participate in it when it comes, which should unsettle us a little. Because frankly, most of us are pretty good at being not far. We can tell you, loving God is heart, soul, mind, strength. We can tell you, loving your neighbor isn't optional. Some of us could pass that quiz in our sleep. But knowing the answer and living the answer, well, they're in two different postal codes. So ask yourself this week, honestly, which lopsided scenario have I built inside my own life? Am I all heart and no mind? Running on feeling, allergic to depth, allergic to Bible study that actually cost me something? Am I all mind and no heart? Can I win the argument? Can I cite the verse? Can I go home having loved nobody? Both of those, half a Shema. It's half a Shema. Yeshua didn't give us a menu. He gave us a whole person's worth of love. Aim vertically at God and horizontally at the person sitting next to you. Look around. I'm talking about the ones who are particularly hard to love. I'm talking about the one who owes you an apology. Maybe even the cat who wants your pizza. And Yeshua, well, he takes it to another level, which we'll see next week. So I want you to not just agree with the greatest commandment, live it. And don't just admire Yeshua's answer. Bow to the one whom David called Lord, our Messiah, Yeshua, the Son of God. Let's stand for the Aaronic benediction.